I don't think people understand the enormity of World War I. The Great War, as it was known, was a cataclysmic event that forever altered the course of history. It was a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation, involving nations from every corner of the globe. The war's impact was felt not just on the battlefields, but in the hearts and minds of millions. A conflict that reshaped the globe. It started in 1914, a year that would mark the beginning of a four-year nightmare. The war drew in countries from Europe, Asia, Africa, and beyond, creating a truly global conflict. Alliances were tested, and new ones were forged in the crucible of war. A spark ignited by a single event. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary set off a chain reaction of alliances and enmities that had been simmering for years. This single act of violence plunged the world into chaos. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This event, seemingly isolated, was the catalyst for a war that would engulf the world. The tensions that had been building for decades finally erupted, leading to a conflict of unimaginable scale. Nations were pulled into a vortex of violence. Trenches became homes, and soldiers lived in these narrow, muddy ditches for months on end. The conditions were harsh, with constant threats from enemy fire, disease, and the elements. Battlefields turned into graveyards. Millions of soldiers from diverse lands marched into a war they thought would end by Christmas. They faced mud, barbed wire, and a deadly new weapon, the machine gun. The scale of death and destruction was unprecedented. They faced mud, barbed wire, and the constant threat of death. The machine gun, a new and terrifying weapon, mowed down soldiers by the thousands, changing the nature of warfare forever. This weapon, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, made traditional battle tactics obsolete. Soldiers had to adapt quickly or face certain death. Yet even in the darkest hours, humanity's spirit endured. Letters from the front, tales of camaraderie, and silent acts of bravery. These stories remind us that even in the midst of horror, there were moments of kindness and solidarity. Soldiers formed bonds that transcended nationalities and backgrounds. By 1918, the guns fell silent, but the scars remained. The Great War didn't just end lives, it ended an era. The world was forever changed, and the echoes of the war still resonate today. The armistice brought an end to the fighting, but the psychological and physical wounds would take much longer to heal. The aftermath of the war saw the redrawing of borders, the collapse of empires, and the birth of new nations. The social and political landscape of the world was irrevocably altered. Join us as we journey through the pictures of World War I. This visual journey will take you through the defining moments of the war, the battles, the leaders, and the ordinary soldiers who lived through it all. Witness the moments that defined a century and the resilience that followed. The images you will see are not just historical artifacts, they are windows into the lives of those who experienced the war firsthand. The war may have ended over a century ago, but its lessons and legacies continue to shape our world. Through these images, we honor the memory of those who fought and those who fell. The end of the war marked the beginning of a long and difficult process of rebuilding. Soldiers returned home to a world that had been forever changed, and societies had to come to terms with the immense loss and devastation. The resilience of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, set off a chain of events that led to the outbreak of World War I. This single act of violence became the spark that ignited a global conflict. The complex web of alliances and treaties between the major powers of Europe quickly drew them into conflict. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized to defend its Slavic ally Serbia, prompting Germany to declare war on Russia. France, bound by treaty to Russia, was soon drawn in against Germany and Austria-Hungary. The United Kingdom, allied to France and bound by treaty to defend Belgium's neutrality, entered the war after Germany invaded Belgium. Within weeks, the conflict had spiraled into a full-scale war involving many of the world's great powers. These alliances, meant to ensure peace, instead created a domino effect, pulling nation after nation into the fray. The world watched in horror as the war machine roared to life, setting the stage for a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation. The world was now on the brink of a four-year nightmare. The Great War had begun, and there was no turning back. The battles that followed would test the limits of human endurance and reshape the globe in ways no one could have imagined. Join us as we delve deeper into the events that led to the outbreak of World War I, exploring the intricate alliances, the political tensions, and the fateful decisions that plunged the world into chaos. The Western Front was the main theater of war during World War I. It was characterized by trench warfare and saw some of the most brutal battles in history, including the Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun. As the war escalated, the Western Front became a symbol of the unrelenting brutality and human cost of the conflict. Stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border, this front line was a maze of trenches, barbed wire, and no man's land, a desolate expanse where countless soldiers lost their lives. The Battle of the Somme, which began on July 1, 1916, epitomized the horrors of trench warfare. On the first day alone, the British Army suffered nearly 60,000 casualties, making it the bloodiest day in British military history. For months, soldiers endured relentless artillery bombardments, machine gun fire, and gas attacks, all while living in waterlogged, rat-infested trenches. By the end of the battle, over 1 million men had been killed or wounded, with little ground gained. Equally devastating was the Battle of Verdun, fought between February and December 1916. Verdun became a symbol of French determination and sacrifice, as French forces held their ground against a relentless German assault. The battle resulted in over 700,000 casualties and left the landscape scarred with craters and the remnants of shattered villages. Life in the trenches was a constant struggle for survival. Soldiers faced not only the enemy, but also harsh weather conditions, disease, and the psychological toll of constant danger. Despite the hardships, camaraderie, and a sense of duty kept many going, even as the war seemed endless. The Western Front became a testament to the futility and devastation of World War I. It was a place where strategies often failed, and human lives were expended for minimal gains. Yet it was also where the resilience and bravery of countless soldiers shone through, leaving an indelible mark on history. Join us in the next chapter as we explore the Eastern Front, where the war unfolded with equal ferocity but under different circumstances. In stark contrast to the static, trench-ridden Western Front, the Eastern Front of World War I was marked by more fluid movements and larger battles. This vast theater of war stretched from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south, encompassing diverse terrains from the dense forest of Poland to the wide plains of Ukraine. Here, the Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary, faced off against the colossal Russian Empire. The battles on the Eastern Front were characterized by sweeping maneuvers and rapid advances, often covering hundreds of miles. This fluidity led to significant shifts in territorial control, unlike the grinding stalemates seen in the West. One of the earliest and most significant battles was the Battle of Tannenberg in August 1914. German forces, under the command of Generals Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff, encircled and decimated the Russian Second Army. The victory at Tannenberg not only halted the Russian advance, but also showcased the effectiveness of German military strategy and communication. As the war progressed, the Eastern Front saw a series of brutal confrontations. The Gorlice-Tarnow offensive in 1915 marked a turning point, with the Central Powers breaking through Russian lines and pushing deep into Russian territory. This offensive demonstrated the devastating impact of coordinated artillery barrages and infantry assaults, leading to massive Russian casualties and a strategic withdrawal. The harsh winters and vast distances on the Eastern Front added to the challenges faced by soldiers. Supply lines were stretched thin, and both sides struggled with logistics, leading to shortages of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The human cost was staggering, with millions of soldiers and civilians affected by the fighting, displacement, and famine. Despite the chaos, the Eastern Front was also a place of innovation and adaptation. Both sides employed new tactics and technologies, from the use of railways for rapid troop movements to the deployment of aircraft for reconnaissance and bombing missions. The Russian Revolution of 1917 dramatically altered the course of the war on the Eastern Front. The abdication of Tsar Nicholas II and the subsequent rise of the Bolsheviks led to the signing of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918, which ended Russia's involvement in the war. This allowed the Central Powers to redirect their forces to the Western Front, but the respite was short-lived. The Eastern Front remains a testament to the complexity and scale of World War I, where vast armies clashed over immense distances and entire nations were reshaped by the conflict. Join us in the next chapter as we delve into the naval battles and the war at sea, which played a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the Great War. Naval warfare played a crucial role in World War I. While the battles on land are often the focus, the conflict at sea was equally pivotal in shaping the outcome of the Great War. The vast oceans became arenas for strategic blockades, daring raids, and technological innovations that would change naval combat forever. One of the most significant aspects of the naval war was the British Royal Navy's blockade of Germany. Beginning in 1914, the blockade aimed to cut off supplies of food, raw materials, and other essential goods to the Central Powers. Using its superior fleet, the Royal Navy established a distant blockade, patrolling the North Sea and intercepting ships bound for Germany. The blockade had a profound impact on the German war effort, leading to severe shortages and contributing to widespread hunger and economic hardship. In response, Germany turned to its fleet of submarines, or U-boats, to counter the British blockade. The German U-boat campaign targeted Allied and neutral shipping, aiming to disrupt supply lines and force Britain into submission. The U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking merchant ships and naval vessels alike. One of the most infamous incidents occurred on May 7, 1915, when the RMS Lusitania, a British ocean liner, was torpedoed and sunk by a German U-boat, resulting in the deaths of 1,198 passengers, including 128 Americans. This event caused international outrage and played a role in bringing the United States into the war. The naval war also saw significant technological advancements. The development of depth charges and improved sonar systems allowed the Allies to better detect and combat U-boats. Moreover, the introduction of convoy systems, where merchant ships traveled in groups escorted by warships, significantly reduced the effectiveness of the U-boat campaign. The Allies' ability to adapt and innovate at sea was crucial in maintaining their supply lines and sustaining the war effort. One of the largest naval battles of the war was the Battle of Jutland, fought between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet from May 31st to June 1st, 1916. Although the battle was tactically inconclusive, with heavy losses on both sides, it reinforced British naval dominance and ensured that the German fleet would remain largely confined to port for the remainder of the war. The war at sea was not limited to the Atlantic Ocean. The Mediterranean and the Baltic Sea also witnessed significant naval engagements. The Ottoman Empire, allied with the Central Powers, launched several naval operations in the Mediterranean, while the Russian and German navies clashed in the Baltic. The impact of naval warfare extended beyond the immediate conflict. The lessons learned and the technologies developed during World War I set the stage for future naval strategies and innovations. The importance of maintaining control of the seas became a central tenet of military doctrine, influencing naval policies for decades to come. As we continue our journey through the Great War, we will explore the home fronts and the significant societal changes that occurred as a result of the conflict. Join us in the next chapter as we delve into the lives of those who remained behind and the ways in which the war reshaped societies around the world. While the battlegrounds of World War I were far removed from daily life, the war had a profound impact on civilian life across the globe. Governments took unprecedented control of their economies, directing resources towards the war effort and implementing measures that would reshape societies. In many countries, industries were nationalized and factories converted to produce munitions and other war materials. Workers, including a significant number of women, took on roles traditionally held by men who were now fighting on the front lines. This shift not only kept the war machine running, but also began to alter gender roles and expectations, planting seeds for future societal changes. Propaganda became a powerful tool used to maintain public support for the war effort and to encourage enlistment. Posters, films, and speeches painted the conflict as a noble cause, a fight for freedom and justice. Governments censored news and controlled the narrative, ensuring that only messages of patriotism and duty reached the masses. Rationing of food and other essential goods became commonplace as resources were diverted to the military. Civilians faced shortages and had to make do with less, fostering a spirit of sacrifice and unity. Victory gardens were planted and communities rallied together to support one another during these trying times. The war also brought about significant social changes. Class distinctions began to blur as people from all walks of life contributed to the war effort. The shared experience of hardship and loss created a sense of camaraderie and collective identity. However, the war also exposed and exacerbated existing social tensions, leading to strikes and protests in some countries as workers demanded better conditions and rights. On the home front, the impact of the war was felt most acutely by those who received the dreaded telegrams informing them of the loss of a loved one. Memorials and monuments began to appear, honoring the fallen and serving as a stark reminder of the war's human cost. As the war dragged on, fatigue and disillusionment set in. The initial fervor gave way to a longing for peace, and the home front became a place of both resilience and weariness. The end of the war would bring relief, but also the challenge of rebuilding and healing a world forever changed. Join us in the next chapter as we explore the final stages of the war and the events that led to the armistice, marking the end of one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. Of World War I stretched into its fourth year, the world yearned for an end to the bloodshed. On November 11, 1918, that moment finally came with the signing of the armistice. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month marked the cessation of hostilities on the Western Front, bringing a sense of profound relief and somber reflection across the globe. The war had wrought unimaginable devastation, leaving entire landscapes scarred and countless lives shattered. Soldiers and civilians alike had endured immense suffering, and the end of the war was a bittersweet victory. The sense of relief was palpable, yet it was tempered by the memory of those who would not return and the daunting task of rebuilding a world in ruins. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers. The treaty imposed harsh penalties and reparations on Germany, redrawing borders and reshaping nations. It aimed to ensure that such a conflict would never happen again, but it also sowed the seeds of future discord. The aftermath of the war saw a world forever changed. The old order had been swept away, and new ideologies and movements began to take root. The League of Nations was established in an effort to foster international cooperation and prevent future conflicts, though its effectiveness would soon be tested. For the millions who survived, the post-war period was a time of both hope and uncertainty. Veterans returned home to a changed society, grappling with the physical and psychological scars of war. Families mourned their lost loved ones, and communities came together to honor their memory. The end of World War I marked the conclusion of one of the most devastating conflicts in human history, but it also signaled the beginning of a new era. The lessons learned and the sacrifices made would shape the course of the 20th century, reminding future generations of the profound cost of war and the enduring pursuit of peace. Join us in our final chapter as we reflect on the legacy of World War I and its lasting impact on the world we live in today. From the ashes of conflict, a new world emerged, forever changed by the Great